In this session, we have three speakers who will discuss encouraging independence during bath time and getting dressed. Dr. Samantha Ewing is a physical therapist, Jenna Zansler is an occupational therapist, and Emma Rivera is a speech language pathologist. All three are professionally recognized in their field, and I am proud to say they're all therapists here at the Warren Center. Samantha, Jenna, and Emma, the floor is yours.
All right, good morning, you guys. I'm gonna go ahead and start by introducing us. My name is Sam. I'm the physical therapist. Right to my right is Emma. She's a speech therapist. And then over there is Jenna, our occupational therapist. So we're gonna talk about independence with dressing and bathing. But to start, we wanted to share a parent perspective on learning this. So we have a video of a client we worked with we'd like to share with you to get going.
This wasn't the only.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jenna. I'm an occupational therapist, and this is one of the moms who I work with. Can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Anna Clark. I have 4 kids. They range in ages from 7 to 1.5, and my son Matthew is my second. He's 5.5. He was born with Charge syndrome, and he has been working with Jenna at the Warren Center and also other therapists, and we've been working both virtually since COVID and also in person.
Okay, so I just wanted to ask her a couple questions about dressing and get a parent perspective on what it is like. So, Anna, in your opinion, what is the hardest part about teaching your kids to get dressed?
Well, all kids have their unique challenges. Matthew specifically, we have to focus on several things. He has some tone issues, he has some balance issues, and he also is very happy to let me do it for him. So we have to make it engaging so that he can focus on dressing and we can incorporate it into our day. He's excited about it and it doesn't seem like a chore. I think that's probably the same for all of my kids, whether they have any kind of disability or not. It's just to make it engaging and help them see it as a way to independence and not just as something that they have to do or as a chore.
Great. We did a lot of working on this, especially virtually through COVID, because I got to see everything firsthand every day. So what techniques that we used during COVID did you find the most useful?
So for me, for Matthew specifically, you had a lot of really good, helpful tips because I always look at it as a perspective of, okay, we know that the starting point is what we would do for our typically developing kids. And Matthew's my second, and I have a typically developing girl who was very focused on independence. And so I didn't really have to teach her to dress. And so with Matthew, with him, being really happy to let me do it for him, and also having issues with balance, of course, and tone, we really have to get creative. And so I had no idea what I was doing. And that's why we see professionals like Jenna. And you helped me specifically with the things I think that were most helpful were where we put Matthew and where we put his clothes. And so things like giving him his shirt, laying it out face down and with the bottom, so he would know to grab it from the bottom and put it over his head. And then also things like, shoes, socks and shoes are still hard for him because he's got balance issues because of his missing vestibular system. So he has to really be in a very secure sitting position. And I remember we talked about making sure that he was in a seat where he could lean back and use his core and push against the back. And then also what types of socks we use were kind of important because not every sock is created equally for him and not every sock is easy for him to put on. And so I think those were a few of the things that we still incorporate now that help him reach the independence with getting dressed.
Awesome. And like reflecting back on all these things, like what made it easiest for you to incorporate these things into your daily routine?
I think that as kind of as crazy as it sounds, because we were doing it virtually and you saw how Matthew was with all 4 of the kids, there were things that I could do that engaged all of them and that kind of, you know, applied to everyone across the board, where it wasn't just, this is what Matthew has to do and it's special, but it was really, this is how all of our kids get dressed. And so I think that because you saw, we were virtual and you saw our whole house, Matthew now can see, oh, well, they're getting dressed this way, so I'm getting dressed this way. So they all really, now just this morning, for example, I woke up, or I came out into the kitchen and they were being sneaky and surprising me by all getting dressed together. And they were all dressed independently.
Well, that's a great surprise. I'd take that
really
one any day.
I know, it was great. So it works.
Yay. Well, I appreciate you taking a few minutes just to discuss it with me. And it's always fun working with you guys. And thanks so much.
No problem. Thank you. I think this wasn't the only.
First, we'll start off talking about dressing. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about the motor skills required for dressing, right? These are some things we need before we can really expect our kiddos to be independent with dressing. The first one is body awareness, that ability to cross midline, bring our arms together, one to the other, down to our feet, that sort of thing. It becomes really important when it comes to dressing so we can know where to put the clothes on and hit the right target with that. We need our balance and strength. You might have to stand on one foot, or when you're pulling your shirt on, you won't be able to see where you're standing, that sort of thing. So we need that strength. We got to reach up over our head, put our shirt on, stand, you know, without support, that sort of stuff. And then coordination, being able to use both sides of our body together. It takes both sides, left and right, to get dressed. So we got to make sure we can use both of them in a coordinated manner.
And some fine motor skills needed, finger strength, coordination and dexterity, tactile discrimination. You have to know you're touching the button and that you're not touching a zipper or not touching, you know, the fabric. And then visual attention. If you cannot get your child to look at what they're doing, you're not going to have a good chance of success.
So when we're dressing, it's also a great time to think about the language that's required for that dressing activity. When we think about language, we like to split it up into two groups: the language that we can understand and the language that we can say. We want to focus first on making sure our child can understand words for different articles of clothing or different body parts before we focus on if they can actually say the word. Remember, just because your child can sing the song head, shoulders, knees, and toes doesn't mean they can actually follow the direction, touch your ear. One great strategy for boosting language is repetition. Children need to hear a word dozens of times before they're able to understand and use it. When dressing, repeat the target word over and over again using short, simple phrases. So for example, if you're practicing with shirt, you can say, shirt, here's your shirt, shirt on. You can also practice following directions by letting your child help you get their clothes out. So you can say things like, go get your pants, or where's your shirt? Again, using lots of repetition. Dressing is also a great opportunity to practice letting your child use their words to tell you what outfit they want for the day. Letting your child pick out their favorite dinosaur shirt or their favorite red pair of shoes is a great way to get them more involved and motivated in that dressing process. If they need support, you can give them a choice of two. For example, do you want the red shirt or the blue shirt? Dressing is also a great opportunity to practice identifying body parts. So when we say identifying, we want them to be able to follow the direction, show me your ear or where's your nose. Children typically should be able to identify 1 to 2 body parts by about 1 year old and begin to identify common articles of clothing around age 2. If your child cannot identify 1 to 2 body parts by 18 months, that could be a red flag for a potential receptive language delay or difficulty understanding that language. So you can practice identifying body parts in activities like dressing, bath time, or putting on lotion. Focus on one body part at a time. It's helpful to start with something that they can see, like their tummy or their toes. remember to use lots of repetition and short, simple phrases. So if you're practicing the tummy, you can say, tummy, where's your tummy? I'm gonna get your tummy, and then tickle them. The more fun your child has, the better they're able to learn that language.
All right, so next we're gonna go over some basic tips for dressing that can be pretty helpful. Like Emma mentioned, we want to use simple words. And then we want to allow the child to complete as much as possible. Being really patient with them and waiting for them to do it. Schedule a lot of time in your day for them to work on getting dressed. When we practice this, we want to make sure we're using good techniques, right? They watch everything you do. So when you're getting dressed, you do it in the same manner that we're teaching them, so they can see that modeling. Music or rhymes really make it fun, so try to use that to engage the kids. You can ask them to help you get dressed. How do I do this? A lot of kids really enjoy teaching you how to do things. And it's always easier to start working on undressing before you work on dressing skills.
So some skills you should see from your 1-year-old, they should hold their arms out or push their arms through the sleeve. When you pull out their shoes or socks, they should be lifting up their foot. And you should see your child pulling off their shoes and socks without any assistance.
All right, and then a 2-year-old, they should be able to take their coat off after you either unzip it or undo the buttons. They can take their shoes off unless they're tied really tight, then you may have to help them with the untying. They can push their pants down with a little bit of assistance. And then after you put their shirt on, they can use their hands to find the armholes. They'll try to put on socks. I don't think they'll be successful yet, but they're attempting. And they can put a shirt on that fastens in the front or a jacket that fastens in the front, but they can't yet do the fastening. And then they can open really large buttons.
3-year-old skills, putting on a simple t-shirt with very little help. They can put on easy to put on shoes, like a slip-on shoe, but they may not have the shoes on the right feet. They can put on socks, but they may not be put on correctly, like the heel may be on top of the foot. They can also pull their pants down. If they're wearing a jacket, they can like zip it up and down, but not thread the zipper. Closing large, simple buttons like on a soft fabric, like a sweater. And then they can take off their shirt without any help.
All right. At 4 years old, they should be able to buckle their shoes or their belt. With the zipper, they should now be able to thread the zipper and zip it up and down. They can put their socks on correctly and put their shoes on with little help. Again, maybe they'll need some help with the tying. They should know the front and the back of their clothing, and they can step into their pants and pull them on by themselves.
And then at 5 years old, your child should be able to dress without supervision, and they're putting their clothes on the correct way every time. So we're talking about putting on the shirt specifically. I usually start teaching how to don a shirt by using a short sleeve shirt. And I usually pick a shirt that's a little big and something that has a picture on the front. So I can teach them to put the picture, face down. And then I always teach head first and then arms. So I teach scrunching up the shirt, pulling it over the head, and then pushing the arms through. If you do the head first, they don't end up with arms in the head hole.
So as you're teaching this dressing process, you can use short, simple phrases to help support and guide your child through this motor task. So again, really simple phrases like shirt off or arm in or arm out. And you want to make sure to use those short, simple phrases the same way every time you do that activity. You can just use the opposite phrases when you're doing the opposite task, putting on instead of taking off. And we'll have these slides available after the presentation, so you can look through each of these specific cues.
All right, so next we're going to talk about putting on pants. It's always easier to start with shorts before we do long pants, just there's less fabric to work with. And we want to start with something with an elastic waist. That way it's a little easier to pull up, and then it might stay stuck if they're having trouble pulling it up. It's not going to fall right down. And then we will start, we'll use both sitting and standing skills. It's a lot harder to stand up while putting your pants on. So we'll use a combination of both. And another good point too is we want to make sure, it seems obvious, we want to make sure we have our shoes off as we're putting pants on and then do shoes after. So it's a little easier to get through the hole. So I like to start again, just like Jenna, we want to scrunch up and kind of see the holes. For me, when we're first learning, I scrunch it up like this and kind of put it on the floor for them so they can see where their feet need to go. So I'd lay it on the floor and then have your kiddo sitting in a chair. Okay, so then they're going to guide their feet through the holes and bend down and pull it up. And we're going to pull it up back to our knee before we stand up. So I'll just bend down, put one foot in, keep that foot on the floor, and then the other. And then while still sitting, I'll pull it up a little bit over my knees. That way we don't have to work nearly as much on balance through this part. So once I get here, it's time I got to stand up. So I got to keep my hands on the pants, stand up, and then I can pull them the rest of the way up. That way we use the combination of both and we never have to stand on one foot. And it just makes that balance a little bit easier. Obviously, as your kid gets a little older, maybe their balance gets better. They can work on the whole skill in standing. You can start with them kind of holding onto a chair or a wall to help with that balance. And then go to using no support at all.
So again, we want to use the same consistent, short little phrases each time we do the activity. And again, these will be available, but we do want to be consistent. Consistency is key for these small children.
Okay, next we're going to talk about socks. One of the important things to do is to make sure that you're modeling putting on socks correctly for your child. And once they've seen you do it and you're using those simple phrases so that they understand what to do, then you can start doing half of the job for them so that they only have to do a little bit of the work. So an example of that might be where I only put the sock halfway on, like maybe here, and then I make the child pull the sock over their heel on their own. You also can practice scrunching the sock up so that they understand holding it with two hands and scrunching it. And if they're having trouble managing the sock, you can take a step back and you can practice putting like rubber bands or scrunchies over your foot because it does require the same type of skill. Something else I recommend, starting with a low cut sock. It's much easier for a child to put on than a high sock or a tall sock. And then I like to pick socks where the heels are different colors so that the child can identify the top from the bottom. Because you can set it out like this and then have them scrunch it up to put it on.
All right, so next we're gonna go ahead and talk about shoes. Before we get into putting shoes on and off, I wanted to do a little sidestep and talk about good supportive tennis shoes. I find having good supportive shoes for your kiddo to be very important, especially if they're going to be active or if they have trouble with balance, have trouble with walking. This can make a big difference. So some things I look for in shoes. All right, the first thing we want to look at is the sole of the shoe. It's this part right here. We want to make sure this is pretty big. A lot of shoes, it might just be like this little brown part. We want it to be, fairly big. Then the next thing we look for is the heel. We want the back to be firm. All right, they'll squish a little bit and that's okay. We don't need it to be completely solid, but a lot of them will just kind of collapse as you squeeze them. This one helps with support for, balance and walking, but it also helps a whole lot when we are practicing putting on our shoes. So this is an important one to look at if you're focusing on dressing. We want our shoes to be lightweight and flexible. We don't want to, your kid to feel like they're walking around with big cinder blocks on their feet. So we're looking for light and flexible. We also don't want to be too flexible. So a test I like to do is kind of try to bend the shoe. And if I can bend it in half this way and get the toe all the way to touching the heel, then it's probably too flexible. So this is kind of a good amount. Then lastly, what I like to look at is the bottom of the shoe. We want it to be fairly straight. I know this one comes in just a little bit, but we don't want it to turn in a lot. If you look at how your feet are shaped, they don't have a little angle on them. So we don't want our shoes to be that way either. And then same with the toes. We want it to be fairly wide for our toes. So we're not trying to squish our kids' toes into them. So that being said, that is the ideal shoe. It's going to be really hard to find a shoe that fits all of those components. So do the best you can. We're just looking for, fairly supportive. It can help make a lot of skills easier for your kid. So next we'll go ahead and talk about putting on the shoe. Just give me the next slide, sorry. Putting on the shoe. So it's easier if we do slip-on or Velcro shoes. Ties are pretty hard to begin with. They slip on or they Velcro, kids can usually work on that themselves. So step one would obviously be undoing the Velcro or undoing the ties. You can start by practicing putting on bigger shoes. We're just practicing the skill at first. Practice with maybe mom or dad's shoes, and then we can work our way to our shoes, or maybe with older siblings, those might be a little easier than the big ones. And again, just let it bring out that firm back. That's really important. And then for shoes, it's really hard knowing our lefts and our rights. So a trick I like to use is get a big sticker, and you can cut it in half and put it in here on the inside of the shoe. And then so if you put a piece on each side, when they hold the shoes together, it should make the whole picture. That way they know which shoe goes on which foot. So for putting it on, again, I like them sitting in a chair to start, or sitting on the floor with some support, and I'll usually have them bring their leg over or their foot over their leg. That way they can see their foot and what they're doing. So I mentioned untying it first, and then we want to loosen it up. That way it's easier to put on. So we're going to pull the tongue out. We want to make sure we put our thumb in the back. A lot of people also like to use shoe horns for getting on shoes, if that might be easier. And then we pull it on, and then to push our heel in, you can usually put one hand on the back of the shoe and kind of hold the other one, the back with the other hand, and push in. That way we get our shoe on. And then after that, we can attach the Velcro, or we can tie it. If this method's hard for your kids, the other way we can teach it is to have them sit on the floor. And instead of putting my hand here to push through, I could put the shoe on the floor and then use my body weight to push the shoe on. Again, I'd probably do this sitting at first because it's kind of hard to bend down and touch your toes and stop on it. But as they get better, they can try working on it and standing.
So again, here are some verbal cues that you can give to your child using those short, simple phrases. And again, these will be available, the presentation will be available after, so you can kind of look through.
Okay, and a lot of parents ask about buttons and zippers, and some strategies
Jenna?
that I use are the following. For the buttons, I always start with large buttons, not small buttons. And then don't attempt buttons when your child is wearing the clothing item. If they can't button something like in front of them or laying on the table in front of them, they're not going to be able to do it like this. So I always start with things in front of them. And it's the same with the zipper, laying the coat in front and working on seeing the threading part of the zipper and putting it in. And once they can do it there, then start practicing it while it's being worn. Another thing that worked really well for me during COVID, kids didn't want to zip their own jackets or button their own buttons, but if mom needed help, they were all ready, to go to town and help mom get her zippers and buttons all managed. So that's another good way to work on it.
All right, so we're gonna take a few minutes here and answer a couple questions on dressing. If there are more questions, we can get to them at the end, but we just, before we switch to bathing, wanted to see if you guys had any questions for us. Okay, we'll check the chat real quick. Sorry, guys.
Yes, we do have some questions.
Okay.
Do you recommend kids wearing shoes before they can walk?
So it depends on where they are at and before they can walk. So I really want them barefoot as much as possible when they're little. We have a lot of nerves in our feet, just like we do the hands. So we want those feet feeling different textures and things. And it's easier to learn to crawl with bare feet without shoes on, because shoes can kind of restrict our movement, making it more difficult to crawl. So I really like to start out barefoot. And then as they start to stand and move around and try to walk, that's when we can start introducing shoes. And right off the bat, I don't like to have them in shoes all day unless you're concerned about, how their feet are looking or their balance. And that's something you might talk to your therapist about or ask them more questions on. But really, until they start independently choosing to come up to stand, that's when I'd start putting shoes on.
The next question I have is, should kids under age 3 wear flip-flops?
So again, supportive shoes are going to make it easier to walk. I like tennis shoes for that. It makes it easier to do the skills, kids at that age want to do. But I know, We like to dress them cute for special occasions, things like that. So as long as they're able to keep the shoe on their foot and you feel they can walk around and it doesn't drastically affect their balance, it's okay every now and then to do those extra things. But if you're going to be, you know, out at the zoo or doing a lot of physical activity, I'd probably try to stick with some good tennis shoes.
Okay. The next question is about bath time. So I'm gonna see if you guys, the questions get answered by your next presentation. And I will keep it there in case, I'll keep it there just in case.
Okay, perfect. Then we'll go back to PowerPoint and talk a little bit about bathing.
Okay, so an important part of bathing is safety. So children shouldn't be in the bathtub or in the shower without supervision. You want to make sure that the surface isn't slippery, so you don't have to worry about them falling, and then closely monitor the water temperature and a child's ability to access the faucet so that they don't get burned.
All right. And at this age, a big part of bath time is the equipment we use. And there is so much equipment out there. I know it seems really hard to choose. So the biggest thing we're looking for with this is obviously safety. We want to make sure your kid's not able to slip under the water and they can be safely positioned. So we got the infant bathers, you know, making sure our head stays up, and then we can work towards something where they're sitting a little more upright. You know, all the pictures I have here are equipment specifically made for bathing, but there's also lots of things you can use at home and practice and make. You just want to make sure it's safe. As they grow out and don't need as much support to sit, we want to make sure we put some sort of non-slip mat on the surface of the tub. That way, as they're moving around, they're not slippery. And then if your kid is a little bit older and really having still a lot of time getting positioned in the bathtub, and you're not finding anything that can work, they do have specifically made bath chairs that you can use a therapist to order for your kiddo. So again, we're just gonna quick go over the skills needed for bathing. It's the exact same skills as dressing for many of the same reasons. So we need that body awareness, the balance and strength, the coordination between both sides. You need the finger strength to help with washing, the tactile discrimination, what are we touching, and the visual attention to perform the task.
And some communication skills that you can practice during bath time. We talked about identifying body parts, but it's also a great opportunity to practice action words. So following directions to scrub, 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 or wash your face, or even action words like close your eyes. It's also a great time to practice prepositions, telling them head back or get in, get out of the tub, and a great opportunity to follow directions.
So 1 to 2 year old skills, at this point, they're just kind of enjoying bath time. They might attempt to help washing themselves, but they might just be playing. Some things you can be doing with them is having them help squeeze the soap bottle. You can have them help with scrubbing the hair and use those words that Emma's been talking about while they're doing it. You can have them help you turn the water on and off to get them engaged in the process. Sometimes that can be helpful with initiating the task. They can pull the drain at the end, hold the towel around them, but they may just be more interested in play, and that's fairly typical for this age.
All right, so 3 to 5 year olds, that's when we, you know, can help try to get them a little bit more engaged at bath time. Again, they're in the water, so they're gonna want to play, so they'll probably need some cueing from you to help out and do these things, but they should be able to wash their body using just instruction and supervision from you. They can scrub their hair, but you still may need to help out with this. It's a little bit harder, and they'll attempt to rinse, but most likely there's still gonna be plenty of soap in their hair, so make sure you check that before they get out. They can turn the water on and off independently, but you're going to need to continue to monitor the temperature for this, making sure they don't make it too hot or too cold. They can pull the drain to let the water out. They can, you know, outside the tub, wash their hands and face independently, and they should be able to dry off independently, and then use those dressing skills we talked about for different ages to help you get undressed before and then back to dressed after bath time.
So like we talked about, using those short, simple phrases, even here, the phrases like get soap, get towel, and again, these will be available, the presentation will be available after for you to look through these.
All right, so bath time is a time a lot of kids really enjoy and like to play and spend time in. So we thought we'd take a minute to talk about some other things you can work on during bath time. So some gross motor skills you can work on. To start, just sitting balance in the water. When the water's moving around and you're on that slippery surface, even with the non-slip pad, it adds some challenges to our balance. So that's a great thing to work on. Kicking, we can do it in sitting, we can do it lying down. Kids love to splash, so we can kick our feet. That'll work on some coordination, alternating our legs. And it can also work on some leg strength. Blowing bubbles in the water works that core and that diaphragm strength really well. And then getting in and out of the bath, practicing sit to stand. Again, just another good strengthening exercise that we can incorporate into bath time.
Some fine motor skills you can do during bath time, having cups in the water and having them practice pouring the water from cup to cup. I've even seen where people will like tape soda bottles where they cut the bottom off and the kids can pour the water into the top of the soda bottle and then it drains into the tub. You can use one finger isolation and pop the bubbles in the bathtub. They make bath crayons. You could write on the wall and then have them erase it with a sponge. And even just squeezing the water out of sponges into the cups or just into the tub works on hand strength.
So let's talk about some language skills that you can work on during bath time. We talked about the language that you can understand and the language that you can say, but before we even work on that, we want to make sure that we have our child's attention. I know some of us have kids who seem to be like they're in their own world or they're moving from activity to activity really quickly. So the best way to get your child's attention is to be the most fun thing in the room. So try to limit the different toys that you have. Just stick with maybe one and make sure you have control over it during a little game. So one game that's really simple, you just use a little washcloth or a sponge, is kind of setting up a little routine, a little play routine. So taking that washcloth, getting their attention, saying, look, baby, look, and then dunking it dramatically in the water, lifting it up and saying 1, 2, 3, squeeze, and then squeezing it out, letting the water drip down, maybe drip down on their head if they like that, and then repeating that fun routine over and over and over again. The goal of this is to get the child to learn this magic word. So the magic word is squeeze. You want to say the word first and then squeeze the washcloth to show your child that the word causes the action. The word is what has the power to keep that fun game going. So you want to repeat that routine, taking the washcloth, dunking it in, lifting it up, saying 1, 2, 3, squeeze, over and over and over again with lots of repetition, lots of simple phrases like we talked about. And then once you've repeated that, and they understand the word squeeze, then you can focus on seeing if they'll actually say the word. So you can hold up that washcloth, 1, 2, 3, and then wait and see if they'll say that magic word squeeze or even just E to keep that game going. Bath time is also a great opportunity to work on turn taking. So the key with turn taking is to have really quick turns. So with that washcloth game, let your child play with it for just less than a minute and then say, my turn, take the washcloth, play with it for just a few seconds, and then give it right back to them. Teaching them those quick turns can be a good foundation for future turn taking when they're having back and forth conversations.
All right, so that's what we have on bath time. So we'll take questions on either bathing or dressing at this time.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself.
Okay.
My son is 3 years old and he is terrified to take a bath. He used to like it, but now it's really a struggle. So I'm guessing they're wanting some ideas on how to make it so it's not such a, make it more fun or more inviting or not so terrifying.
Involving them in the process is a big part of it, so that they know that it's coming and they can be mentally preparing for it. If it is stressful for them to take a bath, you could be like, bath times right after we eat dinner, and then you could be like, okay, we finished dinner. You need to go get your PJs and take them to the bathroom so that you can change into them after bath time. Come help me get the bath ready, pick your toy for the bath. But if they're involved in the process of the bath, they might be less, afraid or less, of a struggle. That's something I would probably recommend. Anybody else?
Yeah, and I think to that point, like Jenna said, having that routine, maybe using like a little visual schedule, like first dinner, then pick out your pajamas, then we go take a bath. And having that consistent routine, maybe something to start off with, maybe you have them light a candle and smell those good smells. And then you can take a bath, and at the end you can blow out the candle to just get that beginning, middle, and end kind of routine. And it can also be a good opportunity to have some family time. Maybe have older siblings come in and play those little games with them, or get mom and dad together and make it be like a good time for just fun social games.
You could also start out just playing in the water, making sure they're okay with that, before we get into bath time, putting a bucket on the floor and letting them splash and play in it, so he can associate water with something fun, and then, work on the bathing skills as well. But making sure he's not afraid of water in general can be a thing to check out.
Going back to the question about getting your child to be more independent at bath time and doing less playing, what you might just have to do is set a timer, and when the timer goes off, the toys go away, and we do our bath time. And then once we finish that, you get 2 more minutes to play or something like that. I don't think you're going to win out over toys if the bathtub is filled with toys. So you're going to have to, have some sort of a routine so they know when it's time to do the washing and they know when it's time to do the playing. So I think I would recommend something like that.
Do we have any other questions? That's all I've got right now. I think we're good with the questions.
All right,
So
well, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, ladies, for great information, and we appreciate you being part of this event. We know that everyone's benefited greatly. Our lunchtime session is Mealtime Madness Breakthrough, tips to make mealtime fun while incorporating language strategies. It starts at noon.